like class?
Yeah.
Like in high school?
Yes.
Man, that's
it was
start.
I'm not terribly good at math, and so there was a lot about chemistry that was it pushed me.
I know Daniel's mom told me all about it.
Well, I mean, obviously she was the teacher of the class, but I only got as good of a grade.
I was worse than you.
I think I had a B. I think I did very good in high school. That was the lowest class I think I ever had, and but I got as high as I did because Miss Fraser did spend some extra time working with me on it outside of class and helping me get through the homework. And I remember one day in the fellowship hall, I think it was like a Wednesday afternoon before Wednesday night service or something, and like just sitting there with my head in my hands trying to figure this chemistry out. And your mom walked up to me and she was like, "Is that a gray hair?" I was like, "Why do you think I have this gray hair?" Sitting funny. In this chemistry class.
That is funny.
I've gone quite gray in the last 5-ish years, but I can't 5-6 years. I don't remember my first. I don't have a memory of.
I have a gray eyebrow.
Really?
Yep.
Hair. Do you see it?
Yeah, I do. It's quite distinguished.
That's the one. That's the only. My gray hair is right there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot up top anymore, but there's quite a bit there. All the red in my beard is turning gray. I used to have a lot of nice red accent in my beard, and that's all.
I will say I've got a ton of great pubes. If you guys.
Hello, I'm Michael Van, and welcome to the Under Towers podcast. My name is Steven.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Sam. I am not depraved.
No gray pubes on the show today.
No. You can imagine it though.
We're trying a slightly different format for the show tonight. Something that we've been talking about, introducing maybe one episode a month or so of essentially doing kind of mini Under Towers book club. Where we just hang out and we talk about the things that we're reading or other subjects related to books, and less of a structured conversation tonight and more of banter. But we do have a couple topics that we talked briefly about in our last book club that we enjoyed very much and want to talk about again. Sam, it was your topic that you brought up. Why don't you introduce it for us here this evening?
Sure. Well, to kind of give context for the topic, we have fallen behind a lot in our reading, so none of us had read the same thing.
Yeah, life got in the way.
But we all did read something, but we couldn't really share about it because we weren't all caught up on the same thing. So the thought came to mind that we've been doing this for a while. It would be cool to talk about in the grand scope of over a year and a half, I think.
Yeah.
To talk about our favorite moments in different stories that have happened throughout the entirety of book club, from the first trilogy we read on until the other stories and collections, and then just random one-off books too. So that was the question. What's your favorite moment from all of the books we've read?
Yeah, which led to a very fun conversation. So we're kind of just going to repeat that tonight. So
yes.
let's start back at the very beginning, before we got into our sword and sorcery run.
Like when we were in church reading the Bible together?
Yeah, well, we don't have to go all the way that far back.
I'm sure we did. We probably did some Bible reading plans together, didn't we?
Some,
Memory
I think.
verses, maybe?
Probably. I think that I probably tried to steer us.
What's your first Bible memory verse? This is a fun offshoot. Mine was John 3:16.
I mean, yeah, that's
probably that one.
Probably it.
Okay.
I think it's probably that one. That's a boring answer, but
we're done.
There we go.
Genesis 1:1's also up there.
Yeah.
What's that?
In the beginning.
In the beginning was the word. Not was the word. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
I just remember the one in Ezekiel where it said his emission was that of donkeys. And I remember them saying, memorize as much scripture as you want. I'm like, all right, I've got a couple.
Got it. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed that assignment.
I did not earn Bible bucks for that one, but...
Bible bucks. There's a phrase I hadn't thought about in years.
Anyways, that's...
we
started reading later, too.
Yeah, mostly meaning what we started in, what was it, May of 2023?
Yeah, May.
So first thing that we read was Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. That quartet of absolutely incredible books.
Yeah. Well, after watching Akira, which we kind of read too, because it's, we
got together, watched Akira, and then we started.
Which is playing at the Belcourt soon, and we must go.
Yes, must.
In 4K.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, Book of the New Sun, that was my first Gene Wolfe, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick just one moment from it. I'm gonna preempt what Sam is gonna say. I think one of my most memorable moments is from Sword of the Lictor, which is my favorite. I think still my favorite book of the quartet. But the Alzabo at the cabin scene was pretty remarkable. I'm obviously, as we've discussed, a horror fan, and it had some kind of horror elements to it, and just a extremely cool sci-fi scene and a really cool fight scene, and just a wild monster that, you know, up to that point we'd heard a lot of things about but hadn't seen one physically, and just so cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that whole series is just really, really special and just unfolds so much. And which I think is the thing that I think is the thing I admire most about it, is just how much it continues to just unfold the more you spend time with it, either rereading or just thinking about it.
Yeah.
There's just always like new avenues, and
Like the whole story.
yeah.
And basically anything Gene writes too.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite thoughts from the first series of books we read was in Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut, which we sort of read in a sort of like a little random
Offshoot, yeah.
offshoot. We're gonna read Sirens of Time.
It is
and
also
pivoting.
a standalone novel. It's not a part of anything, yeah.
But I just loved the like the like so mean to his character's humor in that book was just really delightful.
I was blown away by the humor in that book.
It was
honestly,
really, really funny.
That one newscast that the
it was so good.
General does.
The late night appearance that he's on. It sounded like an actual
really
late night
did.
appearance, and it was the first Vonnegut book that I read.
Same.
And I don't think I had wild expectations, but I had read many of his contemporaries.
Yeah.
And so I can say I was not expecting that level of humor. And I was like actually laughing out loud.
Yeah.
In parts of that book, which does not happen very often.
Yeah, my favorite moment from that is when they all devolve into like seals.
Yeah.
Basically, humanity devolves into seals. Sorry, spoiler alert.
Which is also hilarious.
It is, but they he goes out of his way to say that all the seals just lay on the beach all day and they die at the age of 30. But when one of them farts, they all laugh because farts are still funny. That's basically, he goes out of his way to say that. It's like, wow.
What's really great in that book is the way the narrator gets woven in as a character, and then and like it's got this sarcastic tone, which there's something interesting going on with the way it's written, but you think it's Vonnegut's like authorial voice, but then it's like, oh, it's not really. It's this jaded guy who's
somehow survived.
This ghost man.
Who's
that was this story, and it's like. Oh, he's so negative on humanity because like his life is awful.
He died and became a ghost.
It's so funny.
And he rejected going to the afterlife.
Yeah,
so it's like
because he like is somehow stuck to see what happens.
And it's so good. It's so
I had totally
good.
forgotten about that twist, and that is so funny.
Yeah. Also makes sense like why he's mean because he is a tortured spirit.
Yeah, just having to sit around and watch these people.
It's an interesting
devolve
book
into
too, where, like,
seals.
the way the timeline of the story being told is really, it's one of the less straightforward things I've ever read. It's just like all over
when you're coming at it from a person's experience, however grand the time frame is, it's still their experience. That you can just fast forward through all of like this stuff.
Yeah.
Like his perspective is like what? 2 million years or something like that. And like the one line that recurs at the end is like, we can't make bombs anymore because how can you only do that with flippers and fins? like that's his that's the main
on that note
drawback.
We've actually read a lot of really funny stuff.
Truly.
Way more than you would think.
And that's what
being
I
a
was gonna
sci-fi
say.
fantasy podcast who has not read any sci-fi yet. But
Which like humor is something I expect to show up a little bit here and there, but like a lot of it is like also a lot of humor in fantasy books is like eye roll inducing, where like
Yeah.
when the characters tell each other jokes,
Right.
and it's just like goodness gracious, like
It's
it's
cheese.
just there.
Yeah.
It's not actually funny.
But you're right, actually. As it was like Galapagos was hilarious.
Yes.
Fawford and the Grey
Fawford
Mouser
is hilarious.
is so goddamn
what's the
funny.
Thing you guys talk, where they like both decide to become random priests.
Yeah,
or
well, they
something?
have a falling.
to mostly fight against each other.
They're best friends, but they have a falling out.
What is it over again?
This is we're talking about Fawford and the Grey Mouser. With if you haven't read any of that series,
Yeah.
I highly encourage you. If you love buddy cop duos,
Yeah.
if you love adventure stories, if you love D&D, Fawford and the Grey Mouser was one of the main influences that helped
And
create D&D.
here's a visual. It's
yeah.
one is a really big guy,
7 foot tall,
and then one
Barbarian.
is a really little guy.
5 foot
Little
tall.
thief. So
Mouser, Fawford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're
Fawford's
mostly
the big, Mouser's the
the
little.
one novel is pretty brief. I think it's like 150 pages, and then it's all short stories, so it's
Yeah.
easy to dive in and out.
But yeah, they're all hilarious.
They are.
But the one that again had me literally laughing out loud. I can't remember what it was called, but it was Fawford and the Mouser have a falling out,
yeah,
and
over
they
something.
and
Like,
they each.
what even was the?
I don't remember, but it was like one of those they get into a drunk fight and are no longer friends, and then they each join and become kind of like priests of rival cult religions. It's
Rival
so
religions.
funny.
Isaac of the Jug.
And
That's
the
his
most
god,
absurd,
yeah.
the most absurd religions possible.
While while having another god that they serve, like Ningoblin.
Well, those are the like the wizards that they're
patrons,
the rival
wizards,
wizards that are their patrons. Just so funny. So that was hilarious. The Witcher books have some good humor in them.
They do.
As did not gut bustingly hilarious, but Legend and the Drenai Saga had some funny points too.
Mm-hmm.
Wolfe is very funny as well.
Wolfe is very funny. There's some very, very funny stuff in Wizard Night, especially.
It comes in like moments.
Severian like just basically trying to have sex with everything.
Yes,
He's like a horny boy, like basically.
he is. And then, but I think that for me, I think the funniest thing that we have read, so before that, I know you weren't as huge of a fan of it, but I found Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court absolutely hilarious.
So I found it very funny. I forgot we read that. I love that book.
It was great.
I need to be specific. I don't like the book, but it's very well written, and
You don't like the politics.
yeah, basically, or the statement being made. I don't like. I don't.
Doing the thing.
I don't
is like,
agree with it,
yeah.
but it's a good book, and it is very funny. Some of the humor was still funny, but it's still I was crossing my arms with it. It's not very nice.
It's like, you know what? I get anti-patriotism, but I'm not an anti-patriot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But no,
But-
that was very funny.
Once and Future King,
Once and Future King's also hilarious.
specifically the first two books, because you've got Sir Pellinor and the questing
gosh,
beast.
Yeah, that's
So
so
good.
funny. Well, I have to quest because there's a beast.
It's so
Honestly,
funny.
in the next book, well, there's a few moments, but in the next book when Sir Palamedes and I can't remember the other guy.
King. It's the trio. It becomes the Three Stooges in the second
when they're
book.
like pretending to be the beast.
Yes, because
That was
wait,
honestly-
it is Pellinor, right?
Well, Pelinor's not pretending, but he's
right.
being like
But he's so depressed in the
He's
second
so
book
depressed
because
that the beast is gone.
the beast is gone, and so Palamedes and
I'm spacing on the other guy.
but it is a very Three Stooges thing, and they're so sad that their friend is sad that they pretend to be the questing beast, only for the questing beast to show up and think that they're really hot stuff.
It's also when they're like going back and forth, and they're I'm the haunches and you're the head, and he's like, "Do you think we could add a prance?" No, I think a prance would be appropriate. They just keep going back and forth. It's like, this is amazing. Like,
It's so
what is
funny.
happening?
Yeah,
It's like
that was
it's
funny.
like, and it's a precursor, I think, but it's very much like this is a Monty Python.
It's
sketch.
100% a Monty Python.
Yeah. Well, 'cause, I mean, if you're in that role and you're trying to kill it, you're like, we should up the ante. Like, this thing would probably be prancing right now.
Yeah.
And everyone would be in agreement. Yeah.
No, it's just the way that he wrote it, and it really was fascinating too, and very well executed. Was the hard and extremely dramatic moments were even more so because of how gut-bustingly funny that book is. I'm trying to think
I hadn't read a funny book really, I think, since high school, to be honest.
I hadn't either.
Because we
certainly not to that level.
Not Ask Jeeves. What's the Jeeves book? It's not Ask Jeeves. It's the search engine.
I just remember Captain Underpants. Like
Captain
that was
Underpants
the funny
was
books.
Do you know what I'm talking about with the Jeeves Butler guy?
Yes, I do, and I don't remember what
Those
it was
books
called.
are funny.
Something about Jeeves.
I remember a Samurai Cat book. It was like
Samurai Jack.
I mean, 3 Minute a Boat's hilarious.
Right.
3 Minute a Boat. I read that in high school, which is very funny. And then
I don't think I've ever read a funny book.
Yeah, I've read
on
some
purpose funny books.
I mean, everything, most everything that, like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn.
Yeah.
Mark Twain is a very funny writer, so I remember those being very fun.
I'm trying to remember. There's something else I read that was really funny growing up. This is great podcasting right here, but it's.
Did you ever read the Samurai Cat books?
No.
I don't know if I ever did. I remember Samurai Pizza Cats, the cartoon.
Yeah, there was a Samurai. I think it was just called Samurai Cat, and I got it from the library.
Okay.
Support your local libraries. If you don't have a library membership, get a library membership.
It does something.
And and funding is actively being cut for it right now. But I don't. I was a kid, and I remember. I don't think that I have laughed as hard at a book as I did reading Once and Future King since reading Samurai Cat.
Interesting.
Which is silly.
Once and Future Samurai Cat.
Well, and we talk about funny stuff. I've got two thoughts here. But Black Tongue Thief had a lot of humor in it.
Black Tongue Thief has
a lot of
great
fart
sense
humor,
of humor.
A lot of fart humor. I did though. What's funny was I was listening to it and I cut on my Bluetooth speaker, little JBL, and it was the scene where like I'm spacing on his moon wife's name, but like she ends up like spanking his butt or whatever.
Yep.
Because he's on fire or something. But it like cut her right at the moment. She was like, and she was spanking me arse. And she was like, what are you listening to? Like, yeah,
she was spanking me arse.
Yeah, I don't worry about it. It was like, it's all,
trust me, I like this, but not in that way.
Well, this will be a fun discussion at some point in the future. But I one thing I like very much about Buellman's fantasy series, I still to this day I don't know what the name of the series is. I don't know if there has been one yet.
I don't think it has a name.
But so the Black Tongue Thief universe is both Black Tongue Thief and Daughter's War. To me, are both completely different styles of fantasy in the same universe that work well together. So like Daughter's War is very much kind of Black Company, grimdark military fantasy.
Yeah.
Whereas Black Tongue Thief, if Black Tongue Thief had been written and published 40, 50 years ago, it would have been marketed as a sword and sorcery book.
Yeah.
And had comparisons made constantly to Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, specifically, I think. Because Kinch is very much a Mouser type character. Not exactly, but same vein of goofy rogue, not goofy, but
kind of
funny, scrappy rogue character.
Yep.
Which is interesting how it's marketed as like I see people talk about Black Tongue as like a grimdark fantasy, and it does not feel like a grimdark fantasy to me.
They argue about that one.
At
least in what you've said,
thing about it, and people were including it, and that didn't.
It feels very sword and sorcery to me.
Well, it does feel like grimdark is sort of it's become sort of a catch-all term, I think, in some ways. It's sort of
for some.
It's been watered down significantly.
Yeah, lost its meaning. But
a lot of people agree that not Black Tongue. That Black Company is definitely kind of foundational. Grimdark.
Yes, Black Company is absolutely foundational to grimdark.
But funny moments.
Black Black
before
Company
we
has some
leave
funny
those,
moments.
They do.
They do.
But Mabinogion had the funniest of the funny moments. Not just the little like, sir, you should not kill that mouse scene, or you shouldn't do that, sir. Like, just the fact that anytime there was an altercation or something, whenever they came to an agreement, they're like, we will meet here again 1 year from
1
today.
year.
That will always seem to be like the go-to reasonable thing to do.
Right.
I mean, imagine if like we ever had like an issue happens, like, you know what? Let's not talk. And 1 year from today, talk again on this day.
You know
about whatever it is that just happened to us.
It might fix some things.
I mean,
By the time you get back, it's like, wait, what?
what even was that?
What were we upset about?
Yeah, like maybe we become priests and serve different
Yep.
different gods, and that's what that was. But yeah, I did think that reasoning was hilarious and peppered all through the. It was all through the Mabinogion.
All through it.
They would wait a year to like try and fix things.
Hey, ancient wisdom.
So, I remember I had a second point. We're reading right now. We're going through Dragon Ball. We're starting that this month.
Yes.
Heck yeah.
And I just finished the reading we had planned for this month earlier today, and enjoyed it a lot. But I was really surprised. I've watched through this part previously, but I feel like the tone is slightly different in the show that I remember than the manga. Not like the content's the same, but the tone is different. Where literally talking about funny stuff, it's a comedy manga. Like it's. Like, yes, there's an adventure happening. It's just like all it is jokes.
Yeah.
It's just only jokes. It's kind of blown me away. I like in as far as like screwing up my memory of it and what my expectation of it was, and also I guess like what it becomes. Obviously, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z are like there's lots of actual.
There's like fighting.
There's tons. There's fighting, but there's lots of silliness.
But
all the time.
Goku is the most silly hero.
And there's tooting, and there's all sorts of, and there's dumb gags, and there's all sorts of stuff all the time. But this is like it's only that. There is like the action is also like very, very, very minimal.
Yeah, like Goku catches a fish.
Yeah,
like,
seriously.
That's the action, yeah.
And again, I'm not it's not a dig on it at all. I'm just like, wow, this is just I
didn't realize.
Again, I did not realize it at all. And I do think it's going to ramp into right now they're in that first world.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. I never watched much Dragon Ball. But it's gonna be interesting to see, especially when we get into the DBZ, how much it feels like the action is less because there's no like 3 or 4 weeks of Goku charging up his spirit bomb. How much that pacing changed just from it being in the manga, how much that affects that. If it feels less. If it feels like there's more stuff than just action and fighting because, it's a couple of panels instead of stretched out for weeks and weeks.
But to that point, and I read the 36 chapters today. I read a decent chunk today. There were 2 extended action sequences in all, and there were other things.
All 36 chapters.
But it extended meaning more than like a page or a few frames.
Yeah.
Again, not a criticism. Just was like, wow, that is
interesting.
But it is also funny because like the humor is the very like
little boy,
lowbrow. Like I knew and I remember, but I was like that it. It's funny, but it's also like a gag that they just keep returning to where like the first few times I laughed and then I was like, okay, this is like it's already getting cut off.
This is a thing, yeah.
But it's like it becomes funny again.
Yeah.
Like,
that's my favorite. That's
Master Roshi trying to see boobs again. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Also, you get the origin of the Puff Puff and details exactly of what the Puff Puff is.
Really?
Yes.
If you're unfamiliar with the Puff Puff, it is a recurring thing in Dragon Quest games.
Yes.
Which both Dragon Quest and Dragon Ball being Akira Toriyama, at least artwork in the Dragon Ball series case. So that's another Toriyama reference.
Yep. So I won't spoil it for you, or get canceled talking about it. It's not really that bad, but
maybe we'll have a Puff Puff origin episode where we'll put a trigger warning in front of it.
NSFW. Yeah, we can't go on that tangent.
Yeah.
Other books we've read though.
Well, and as far as humor, while we're wrapping up the humor side, there's some funny stuff, some very funny stuff. Not in Berserk. It's definitely not as much.
Like Puck, basically. Only.
Puck for sure. And what's the little boy's name? Monkey Boy. That.
Based on it too.
Anyways, but what genuinely had a lot of comedy in it was Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, it did.
So before we get into comedy, I want to throw back to the Alzabo thing because
Bring it back to the Alzabo.
the moment of Alzabo I love because it reminded me of the moment with the Chimera that what's the dude's alchemist name? He turned his daughter Nina into a Chimera, like mixture with like a dog or something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Ultimately, having her voice be adopted by this creature who doesn't like retain any sort of the knowledge that Nina once was or would have been. So that whole moment, I think, was kind of captured in that both of those scenes for me. The whole like alarming thing of the Alzabo or the Chimera taking on the voice of someone and maybe a little bit of the essence, but not the real person, and kind of becoming this whole monster version of that person.
Yeah, it's bone chilling.
Yeah, and also trying to, I guess, manipulate the person that they were in relationship with, almost like a surrogate kind of sort of clone type thing. So I thought that was very, very alarming, but also compelling as a story piece.
Definitely.
It is.
Anyways, funny stuff.
Funny stuff.
It is interesting with the Alzabo scene where like you could probably read that and it just be like, okay, this is just a piece of whatever. It's not like. But, like, the more you actually, like, as you read it, like, put yourself, like, in that moment, it really is just, like, this is just so awful.
Yeah.
Truly.
Like, the Alzabo
so
ate the lady's son and then takes on the son's voice and like,
who is pleading
his sound,
with him to come
pleading,
out.
please let me come inside, Mom. Mom, let me come inside.
It's terrible.
But it's like, this is a monster trying to eat you using its knowledge and who it has become but also kind of becoming that person saying, come be with me in this monster that ate me. Like, so the plea like twisted. Makes sense from a certain point of view, but is also maniacal and malicious.
So that's that sequence in that book too, to go kind of to really, we're circling back, is so amazing because that the Alzabo shows up a chapter or so later. Yeah. When he meets the zoanthropes, which are people that have gotten rid of their humanity. Yeah. And they've become basically zombies.
Like zombies, but alive zombies.
They've decided to remove themselves from society, and they run into them, and they just like they're apes basically, and they're like attacking them. And he's with the little boy. The Alzabo's eaten the rest of his family.
Little Severian.
Little Severian.
Rip.
And R.I.P. And
death by
but then
lightning.
the Alzabo shows up and then defends them and fights the zoanthropes.
Because it is.
Yep.
Because so there's like this whole thing where like, wait, you think, oh, it's just using the voice to get at the people, but it's like
it's kind of both.
It's kind of both. It's actually wanting to protect them.
Which is what makes an Alzabo so dangerous, is because
it's
well,
not
but also
motivation.
like
the motivation of consuming is its primary thing. It's primarily going to consume everything, but there is an alternative motive there. Yeah, it's come be with us.
Well, and I mean, we know how Severian gains Thekla being a part of him is through an Alzabo, so it's It's
I mean, in essence, it's like kind of a less tyrannical way.
No. Fascinating stuff.
It is.
If you have not read Book of the New Sun, stop listening to the podcast and go listen. The audiobook is fantastic.
Like and subscribe first.
The book. Yeah, like and subscribe
and then you can go.
Yeah.
And maybe share it and like pause and then replay later. Or just keep it playing and just read while it's playing.
There you go. So, lots of funny stuff. What were some other standouts for you guys from the last year and a half of reading books?
Druss's speeches, any one of them.
Yep.
In Legend.
Yeah, like even when he's like trying to shape up everyone, like just like listen here, shitheads, be better. Like basically that's all he's saying, but the way it's written is so like I want to be a better person. You know, like it really motivates you, and I don't really know why, but it does.
No, he had some great kind of hero last stand speeches. There's some similar ones in that Corbin gives in Faithful and the Fallen, which makes sense since David Gemmell and the Drenai sagas in particular are massive influences on John Gwynne, which I could really see having already read Faithful and the Fallen once and then reading a few books in the Drenai saga and then reading Faithful and the Fallen again.
It is pretty obvious.
Yeah, he wears his influences on his sleeve, which I respect and appreciate way more than, an author trying to pretend like, oh, I have no influences. This is all from my super big brain.
This is called pure ego.
I'm trying to think of that's a fun category of the Theoden Aragorn speech, the hero speech.
Speeches?
I'm trying to think. There weren't a whole lot of other ones in what we read because with the
big speeches.
part of the sword and sorcery, those kind of heroics aren't really part of that.
I feel like Fafner had a funny one with the cats.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But like they were kind of already gonna do that anyway.
Yeah, it was not quite the same.
No, it was funny, but
I mean, the Gemmels is the switch into heroic fantasy, so that is why we would see some of that there. But not a whole lot more in the epic, rousing speech department this go around.
I think
Elric did a couple.
That's what I was about to say.
Elric
I feel like he
certainly
actually did near the end. There was something.
Maybe he did.
I'm spacing a little bit.
Maybe he was having.
At some point, I want us to reread Elric, the first two books, but I think we maybe have mentioned this before. Reading them in the chronological order of when they were written,
and not reading the third one.
So reading in publication order, and stopping after
the Native
was
Americans.
Stormbringer. Was Stormbringer the last book?
Yeah, I might even quit after that. I might not even read the '80s novels either.
I just want to read Stormbringer, like up to wherever Stormbringer ends, like that whole thing.
Wasn't that the one that like has a very kind of final ending?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then there are ones written after that are like back.
Oh, I see.
Abel has some speeches.
Some, no, but they're not
like
quite the same.
Yeah. Before some giant fights. There's a little bit of.
There's a little bit of rallying, but it's not to the same extent.
Not on that level. No.
Not the epic
feel
scale
like
of it.
Does. Tarzan doesn't really.
No.
What a good story, though.
Tarzan is phenomenal. And I think we mentioned Tarzan in the last episode when we were talking about.
We talked at length about Tarzan.
Yeah. And I think in the last episode when we were talking about adaptations, I think I mentioned that that's one that for whatever stupid reason has never been adapted properly.
Right.
What did I say about Tarzan? I really liked what I said. I forgot, though.
You did make a fascinating point.
I think something along the lines of it being the most unique story that's been told in probably 60, 70 years, maybe.
No, there was something else though. It'll come to us when we stop recording.
Like something about being raised by wolves, raised by apes. I remember talking about that.
Yeah, it's an awesome story. It is. You have to know going into it. It's a product of its time, but
luck being a big thing.
Yeah. But it's so cool. It's just cool.
Well,
it's just fun. It's cool.
When you talk about a product of his time, I feel like it gets a little bit of a rap, but also it was less that way than I expected. There's some stuff, but
not as bad as it could have been or than you might expect it to be.
Which
the sexism actually is kind of worse than the racism, which you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Huh. Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking jungle stuff, it makes sense for certain species, and then others it doesn't. Which I also think is super interesting too. Like some sexism stuff in the whole like jungle sort of thing. Like,
right. Well, from Tarzan's perspective, not knowing other humans or anything, just
yeah. I'm just saying, like the female lions, you don't mess with those.
Yeah,
you know,
no.
like any female sort of cat-like thing, like those are the dangerous
Yeah,
zones.
100%.
And I find that fascinating, actually.
Well, and from that time period too, we talk about highlights.
Conan.
Reading through Conan for the first time
So
was
good.
definitely one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And encountering it,
Very funny as well.
We read the
Yep.
They do have a lot of humor actually. We read the Del Rey collections, which are how we would like to read the Elric stories,
Chronological,
which are given chronologically from when they were written, not even when they were published, but when they were written. And although I would take publication order instead of written, but there's value to both.
Well, they were essentially publication order, though. I think
close.
for
Well,
him,
I think there's some flip flopping around.
there's the one that was never published,
at
that
all, right.
shouldn't have been.
But
They kind of did him dirty by including that one.
But to start those with Phoenix on the Sword, which is
Such a
divided
good
into
moment.
like I think 3 or 4 chapters, and like your first introduction to the world is
he separates all
is
7
this-
of them.
yeah, but it's these 2 villains scheming against King Conan, and it's this long, like meandering dialogue basically between the 2 of them, and it's like I knew it was like pulp fiction, and I knew it was going to be like fun magazine stories, and there are a lot of them, especially once you get into like the meat of the Conan stories. There's a lot of that where it's just like he's on an island and he's going to like fight and do some stuff. But to start, it was like, oh, this is like capital L literature. Like,
Yeah.
this is like
100%.
this is
Well, that whole opening is like obviously inspired by Shakespeare's Henry V, because
Yeah.
it's practically the same opening. It's just that in Henry V, it's these 2 characters that are conspiring for how to get Henry to go to war with France, whether he wants to or not.
Yeah.
And then in Conan, it's just they're conspiring directly against Conan.
But then when we get introduced to Conan in the next section, we get to see him in his room, and then he has like a dream vision. Like the next, it's like both things, and then like in the 3rd act, he fights the monster and everything else. But it's like
Yeah, it ends with the supernatural.
but like he gets taken by a wizard in a dream and sees like a statue of Set and all this different. It's like okay, this starts with scheming and plotting evil stuff. Then we get dream visions, and then we get a fight at the. It was just like, wow, that is, again, for all the like loincloth laden like muscle bound guy running around stuff that we think of as Conan. It's
which is Conan.
there's a lot of that.
That's what my favorite, because I had never read any Conan. All I knew before we started this was that Arnold Schwarzenegger played him, and I could just see the VHS cover of it. But reading this the way we did with this first book, to me, the thing that stood out is like, this is like a post-victorious Conan who is now king, and literally doesn't really need or have he doesn't need to have a motivation to like rule or anything, and kind of doesn't, because that's not his like proclivity. But he also doesn't go the way of like a Robert Baratheon type of king, which just like, drinks and whores his way to the end.
Mm-hmm.
He sort of stays sharp, but also kind of doesn't do a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And I found that very interesting about the character of Conan, like, because you imagine a guy that's like a barbarian, like a loincloth, like laden, like what does that person do once they have it all? Like, who knows? And I thought this story really captured a path that person could take, and I thought it was super interesting, and still being able to totally kick ass. Like, at the same time.
It tells you a lot about Conan for all the rest of the stories. It influences how you look at him for all the rest of the stories, knowing where he ends up.
Yeah.
As not just a king, but like a wise and good and just king.
Yeah, but maybe doesn't rule actively, but kind of doesn't not rule act. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's almost like a gentle complacency. Because I wouldn't say that the Conan we were given in Phoenix was a great king.
He was beloved by his people.
He was,
but he was
also
maybe
wasn't,
not the best politician.
he
on
wasn't,
that side of it.
He wasn't doing much for their benefit. They just liked the guy. You know what I mean? But the way it came across is he wasn't like actively doing much.
Well,
good.
that comes up more in the the story where he gets captured because they do like sow seeds of
Yeah.
and he's king and seeds of doubt, and there are people that believe he's not good. He's like, he's still beloved, but it is like, yeah, because he's not actively politicking and doing that. You get to see a little bit of both of that. But it's kind of the idea also that Conan's a king where like he's going to keep his kingdom safe, but he's also going to let people like rule themselves, which would make sense, I think, with what we know of Howard's politics. Like, it would be like, he's not going to be an active king because that's actually like a
bad thing.
Yeah, we're going to like a reduce crime and like stay low other than that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Reduce
No, you're not
crime.
wrong.
Taxes are the same. No more taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like to contrast how awesome the Del Rey Conan books are with the Elric books. I love the physical, the actual literal books.
Yeah.
The covers are spectacular for the new
Very high quality.
Elric books. I think it's
do have
Michael
some very
Whelan, I want to
bad
say,
ones,
is the name of the artist that did the paintings.
I can't
I think that's his name. But classic Elric paintings on the front covers. And the first two books, physical books, again, not talking about what's in them because mostly it's short stories. There are some great shorts in them, but I truly do think that something is lost, even though it is more linear than Conan in some ways.
Yeah.
I think there is still a lot missing by reading it in story chronological order and not publication order.
Yeah.
And I do think that it would be, because if you haven't been able to tell already, Elric and Michael Moorcock kind of left a sour taste in our mouth.
Love-hate.
It's very much love-hate. And I feel like we might have felt
Starts
different
with
about
love,
it.
Ends with hate, for sure.
I feel like we might have felt different about it if we had stopped with Stormbringer.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Not the new stuff. And then also I do think that there probably was something that is missed and would have felt better if we had read them more spread out, for sure.
Yes.
Not back to back to back to back,
Listen,
but
if you talk bad about Tolkien,
Well, I mean, that's
the big
which
thing. Like that's
I'm even capable of divorcing that from what he wrote to some degree.
but he didn't talk bad about him in the way that, like, I guess is like kind of classic now, like racism, sexism. He talked about him just being a bad writer, which is
right. Well, and like
not cool.
it'd be one thing if it's Gene Wolfe that was saying something like that, but like let's be
But why
real,
would he
the
do that? 'Cause
quality
it's really dumb.
exactly.
Yeah.
The quality of writing is not there in the Elric series to be able
He
to
can't
just
back it up.
it's
And he has that
just,
third book, which really does
especially when
bad
oh my
thing
god.
for him.
Yeah, and I think publication order, which would let you see how the character was being developed in the author's mind, and show you how he was introduced instead of like the way it is. You get a prequel as your first introduction, which are like almost a decade into the author, Michael Moorcock thinking about Elric, and then what you get in that book then ends up being very convoluted. And I still enjoyed that first Elric of Benibene, but again, it was still like, I remember reading it when I was first going through it, I was still like kind of up and down about it. And then again, you're in several early novels, like, and I remember just feeling like this is very strange.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting into the meat of the stories and enjoying those short stories that were then collected into novels a lot. But then, and feeling like there was a lot of like heart in those, but then but you've like, it's just like, wait, this is so strange. Again, the way like the way you're encountering this, where like, again, I've read prequels after being introduced to a character before that like people
They
do
felt
that all
more.
the time.
They felt more
Yeah.
intentional, though.
Yes.
Well, and most of the
Like, okay, now I'm trying to make you rethink this character by giving you information from like
Which it's like
that's
you
totally
you kind of
possible.
like the way that Moorcock's mind works. You just wish he had like someone on the side being like, "This is great. maybe do this part of what you're
Yeah,
thinking.
no, he's great ideas. But my biggest thing, and the main reason I feel like I want to revisit it at some point with you guys, is that there's enough people that either I really like their work or I value their opinion on things. Like we're reading through Joe Abercrombie right now, and he talks about Michael Moorcock being a big influence. And obviously he started reading them when he was younger than we were when we first read them. But I love his work, and so I feel like if he liked it a lot, and Brandon Sanderson and a bunch of other people,
gotta give it a second shot.
But
right?
then I think,
well, I just feel like we missed something that some of these other guys didn't miss because they were reading it almost assuredly in more of a publication order, because these
fair.
editions that we read only started coming out a few years ago.
yeah,
I think it's fair.
It's also I think if you like fantasy and you read Moorcock as a teenager, it's like when you love Taking Back Sunday as a teenager.
Sure.
And you're like, this is the best.
Yeah.
And there's a few songs that'll stick with you later in years,
Sure.
and you'll just remember those songs as being very good.
Yeah.
But you're not like Taking Back Sunday is amazing.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like
There's a couple good ones.
there's a couple good ones. Those rise to the top, and then you just fondly remember loving it as a
Man,
teenager.
I cannot believe how funny that is.
That's
That
how
is. I mean, I will say that, like,
It just makes me think of Three Doors Down.
if we had read Elric when we were
we
teenagers,
would probably thought it was very cool.
it would have been
we
one of the coolest
tore
things
up
that we had read.
That Switchfoot album for sure.
Hell yeah, we did.
Talked a lot about the beautiful letdown.
Yeah, we did, man.
And
some
some
of
of it,
You know what? I still listen to that every once in a while. There's a couple songs,
Yeah,
not
but-
the whole thing,
but
not
we
front
love
to
it on
back.
pure nostalgia.
Yeah.
If we listened to that today, we'd be like, we would just turn it off. It's all
If it came on today, it's not my taste exactly, but
Yeah,
that's
okay.
a that's
I
a
don't
very
know. Okay,
funny
okay.
analogy.
But also there are some really good ideas, some aesthetics that he developed that are new. And interestingly, we were talking about Grimdark.
the whole anti-Conan is
Yes.
a very interesting new
the
idea.
black sword, the sentient sword, which is not totally new, but he did do that in an interesting and different way.
Definitely.
Who's that weird
Yeah.
god?
And I
Who's the
will
weird
say-
god he has to talk to?
Eric.
Ariok.
Yeah,
There's a lot of cool
Ariok,
stuff.
blood for
But-
Ariok,
and
blood and
his-
souls. Yeah.
He was also not the first person to do chaos and law fighting. That was
Wildly
actually,
influential.
But-
it was actually Paul Anderson,
but-
but he developed it. And
it did seem very,
and it's
very
also
like
very-
his
yes.
thing.
But I will also say that, interestingly, those stories have a futility in them, which is very grimdark. I've actually heard
Yeah.
some people say that
Yeah.
they were even arguing that Elric is sort of the progenitor of grimdark, and from that angle, I can buy it, especially if you exclude the later novels. Like his storyline, especially when you read like the especially that Stormbringer novel, it's like a pretty tragic tale.
Yeah.
And I can see where, like, okay, and again, if you're like, that's the beginning of like fantasy, but like downer vibes, like
Yeah.
which
His
is
struggle
Well,
is
I would
pretty
say what I would say
dark.
I would say I still, and maybe this probably is a little bit biased on my part. I would say that I would still put Elric in Sword and Sorcery,
I mean, it's definitely sword and sorcery.
but Grimdark isn't just a response to, if you look at the time period that it started coming out in the early 80s with Black Company, it's not just a response to Tolkienian epic fantasy, it's also an evolution of Sword and Sorcery. And so I would argue that Elric, later Elric, Stormbringer era Elric, is like, it's not full grimdark, but it's like the
Grandfather.
it's like the Lucy missing link
Yeah.
in the evolution
Yeah.
between Sword and Sorcery and grimdark.
I think that checks out.
Well, and interestingly, on that note, I've seen a lot of people classify Black Company as Sword and Sorcery, which I actually think it fits.
Well, there are swords
loose-
and literally sorcery. So
I think it fits the loose genre characteristics. Like it's not an adventure tale as much, but like that. So I think those lines being
well, I
blurred
mean, you could argue, because I firmly believe that Black Company is the first true grimdark story. Please leave in the comments if you disagree and you have a different
fun.
book. I would love to read it, but you could almost argue that he kind of inadvertently created what we think of as grimdark by taking some of those darker late era sword and sorcery tropes and putting it in an epic fantasy setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the world that Black Company inhabits, if you tweaked a few things and told the story from a different perspective,
yeah.
If it was purely from Darling's perspective or something the whole time, you could have like a darker, still a dark, but like a more traditional epic fantasy. Yeah. But because of the perspective that he tells it through,
Sure.
I could definitely see making an argument that he ended up creating grimdark as we know it now by truly combining those two elements. So it wasn't just like I don't think that Glenn Cook set out to subvert anything.
Sure.
I don't think he was trying specifically to evolve the genre into that next.
But in that same
point,
breath, who does?
Well, I think
most people that create something new are just telling the story the way they do.
Right.
And then boom, a new genre comes.
Yes, and I think that if you are purposefully trying to subvert for subversion's sake, it is much more likely that it's not going to be a good product.
And you're kind of a cunt.
Yeah. Frequently, yes. but I think that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Mom.
And I think that and I think that you can make the argument in the case of Black Company that is probably exactly what happened. And I'd be interested to talk to Glenn Cook someday and see if that was a purposeful thing. If he was specifically trying
we just need to know somebody at the publishing company.
I know. That would be wonderful. I would do unspeakable things.
I love conversations about defining things, and the grimdark. It's funny with the grimdark with me because I've actually not read that many books that would even fit the genre, but it's one that's very like the actual definition of it is very elusive, and it's one that's interesting because people argue a lot about what is and isn't it.
Yeah, like the thing
because
you said.
there's so many things about Black Company that do fit, but then it also it actually is a pretty hopeful book to where which would, and again I'm not arguing with you, but it. Like I get why someone would say, "Well, it's not grimdark because it's actually, it's too hopeful."
Well, I will say,
a
lot of that disappears in the
later
later
books. And that's fair. And that's fair. And the original sort of.
But that thing you sent,
I'm not arguing with you.
That guy said that Children of Huron is grimdark.
Right. Which actually
I have not read it, so I'm not sure.
It actually ends completely bleakly too.
Well, I think
it actually sort of fits.
Here's how I would, because I think of the three of us, I think I've read more grimdark.
For sure.
And I think that the way that I would describe it and what I kind of understood as the definition of what is grimdark is it still is fantasy. It still is an epic scale of fantasy, but usually trying to be told from a more realistic perspective. It doesn't have super rigid magic systems like Brandon Sanderson's work, for instance. But I think that the main point is two things: the realism in air quotes. If you're just listening to this, realism. So like a Game of Thrones type thing, Black Company, where you're getting this kind of down to earth grunts of the military perspective. Mm-hmm. And then not just moral ambiguity, but morally gray protagonists, not just morally gray characters, but morally gray protagonists where even your protagonists are not necessarily, they would not necessarily be considered the good guy in a traditional epic fantasy. Yeah. That certainly is the case in the first two books of the Black Company. We're reading through, like I said, we're reading First Law by Joe Abercrombie. A lot of his characters and a lot of the viewpoint characters, even though you love them and he writes them so well, it's impossible not to love some of these characters. Very morally gray. I mean, one of them is a torturer, for Christ's sake. It's like that's his job. Is he's this crippled torturer, and yet he's one of the most compelling and fun to read characters in 21st century fantasy. Yeah, so it's I think that those are the two main defining things. It's not even so much. I don't think of it so much as like. I mean, some of it is very grim and dark in its tone and atmosphere, and some of it gets, very edgelordy and up its own ass about, dark. But I don't think that the genre itself is defined by like a hopeless ending so much as trying to come at fantasy with a more realistic perspective, and that also including characters and protagonists in particular that are not squeaky clean knight in shining armor.
Well, again, it all just depends on how you define it. I do think an interesting thing to think about based on your topic, because I will say a few thoughts. I know, like, in some ways, I think First Law is like the grimdark series, the way I think people think about it. But honestly, reading it, I've read through the first 2 books now. I'm reading it. I was like, this doesn't feel like grimdark to me at all. Like,
right,
and again, this is me sort of like coming at it from the outside. Like, this just seems like regular fantasy. Like and regular not as a diss.
I wonder if tropes are kind of screwing that up.
Maybe so. I don't know.
But I do have.
Although I did see some people say they were like, before you don't call it grimdark, read the last book.
Yeah, it takes it. You really do have to take. You have to wait until book 3.
I'm just presenting it so far, but.
No, I don't disagree, and I especially feel it more reading it. This is my 3rd time going through it, and both the last time I read it last year, and then this time having read all of the Sword and Sorcery that we've read, it is a vastly different experience than the first time that I read them, as far as like really seeing influences and beyond, but beyond just the Black Company and things and Tolkien and things like that.
What's interesting too is I know a lot of people say grimdark is A Song of Ice and Fire, but then also a lot of people are like, well, actually, it's probably just epic fantasy, but also we don't really know because it's not done.
Sure.
So
that's fair.
Say either way.
I think one thing that's not brought up a lot is grimdark. The title comes from 40K. Yeah, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
Yeah,
that's where it comes from.
So it just makes
pretty fun.
That's the thing. Well, interesting. I remember we were talking about it, and again, you love metal. Grimdark feels analogous to metal in a lot of ways too.
Hell yeah.
But
most metal.
Here's the one thing I do think where you talk about it being a you talk about Black Company being either the progenitor of or the first example of. It's sort of like, and again, I'm going to use obvious metal examples, but it's kind of like Metallica is metal.
Yeah.
But it's really not metal like.
Well, here I'm going to
refine. It's not metal like.
I'm going to refine that for you. I'm going to say.
I know there's lots of different types of metal.
I'm going to say Black Company is to grimdark as we know it now as Black Sabbath is to metal.
Yeah. That's even. Okay,
whereas like Black Sabbath is metal.
Yeah.
It does not sound like what is happening now.
Like
at
the
all.
Nosferatu 1922 is.
But
children could watch that.
But none of what we know of as metal now would exist without Black Sabbath.
Yeah. That's a great way.
Like the Beatles and pop music.
But I think that's a great way.
Although, there is a very good argument for "She's So Heavy," the Beatles song, being a progenitor of metal.
Oh, sure. Oh. Yeah, she's so
because specifically the riff, the dome, 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 boom, boom.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. That's a doom metal riff. Like it's slowed down. It's minor key. It's like it and it's before Black Sabbath was doing their thing. And it's
everybody's riffing on everybody.
Yep.
I do have some final questions that I would like to throw whenever we're done talking.
Okay.
We can start. Is this like final for our books that we have already read? Because I think I would like to end on a conversation briefly talking about what we're looking forward to this year.
Prior to that,
I'm maybe pivoting there a little bit too, because I think there's interesting, and it's very much not.
Mine are rapid fire, so
Okay. Well, we'll do you in a minute, but this is maybe a good pivot for us to talk about things we're reading now, because right now we're reading Jack Vance's Lioness trilogy.
Woo, boy.
So goddamn good.
But I actually think,
and we have a special guest lined up
We do.
to talk with us about that.
and to maybe do some like little tiny chats about it. Soldrin's Garden is the first book, and there are some things about that are, I think there's some grimdark influences. Some of it not. But
Grimdark is influencing Jack, or Jack is influencing...
Well,
No.
so
Jack Vance is influencing.
Yeah.
I think,
that makes sense.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Lioness was coming out.
1983,
So
the year before.
right before, so
Black
like
Company. Yeah,
go for it, kill it. Yeah, so like Black Company would have been written. So it's so fascinating.
At the same time.
God, what a time! What a fucking time, dude!
But
You have
there's-
Black Company, Lioness. You had Legend came out in '84 also.
Yeah.
So it's like
There's
the genre was shifting.
It's really shifting.
It's
a
all
good time.
you know what it is.
Yeah.
You know what Lioness is.
Yeah.
Lioness, and I had thought about this the other day. Lioness is grimdark George MacDonald.
Yeah, basically, because you get the yes.
Yeah, almost
'Cause you
like almost poetry.
It's
and
fairy
in that
stories.
Yes.
And that aspect of it is like nobody, as far as I'm aware, is doing stuff like that. But I think the weaving in the political machinations and like the harsh reality of that with fantasy, I feel like I've not read. That's like the earliest that I've read of someone doing that.
Yeah.
Because you get, and this is very early in the book, so it's not really a spoiler, but like you're reading, right? It's like a princess story.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, and it's good. And then they capture.
Not Rapunzel. Don't expect
No.
Yeah,
Rapunzel.
and it takes a
It
turn.
Takes a huge turn. And there's a huge turn that's also a very grimdark moment that when I first read it, I'm like, I did not see it coming at all. And I was just like,
Neither. Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yeah.
my, like, okay. But
There's a couple moments like that.
But when they capture the ska and they bring everyone out and then they hung them upside down, they cut, and you're like, you've read a princess story so far with like rumors of politics going on. And
Oh,
wars.
yeah, the
and then
level, yeah.
They're like, oh, they scar these like rogue people that are kind of invaders,
Vikings.
Viking types.
They're pretty
And
cool,
like,
though.
Oh, they offered them to like let him go, but they said no. So then they hung them upside down and they cut their bellies and let their entrails hang in front of their heads. And you're just like, I've been reading a princess story. Like what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening right now? Like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And then there's several other moments in that book where it's just like, whoa, this is like that's where like again
The tone doesn't match
it
what's
reminds,
happening.
I've not
yeah.
read A Song of Ice and Fire. It reminds me a little bit of the Game of Thrones show, which like will shift from like hyper violent to not.
Yeah.
I will say I've read blogs from George R. R. Martin and he's talked about his fondness for Jack Vance and Linus, so I know it's
absolutely.
I know that's an influence on him, but either way I don't know, but it really is. There was something special happening in that like 80s time period, but. Yeah.
Well, it's
Maybe
similar
it was
to
aliens.
I always bring it back with when we talk about subversion and genres evolving, but that's also when like Unforgiven was coming out and the Western was changing as well.
Yeah.
So
That's a really-
it's
yeah,
fascinating,
Lethal Weapon
fascinating
1
time.
as well.
Well, and
Yes.
even that, I think you could probably
Great
put that
film.
later 70s period. There was like
Definitely,
something-
yeah.
And honestly, there was an interesting similar thing happening in film. Like the 70s is like the golden age of film, and
Yeah, that's
a lot
when
of people
Playboy
say.
started. Too.
That's not what I mean. Okay, yeah.
I'm
Okay.
just kidding.
Before
All
we
right,
talk
so-
about books, did you want to do your rapid fire?
I do.
first?
I
Yeah,
really
give it to
want
us.
to. Okay. So, reflecting on this past year and a half, I would like to highlight 4 questions.
Oh.
And they are, out of every story we've read, watched, or talked about, what is the happiest moment, saddest moment, most surprising moment, and the sexiest moment?
Okay. So, in the book,
Anything
in
we've
the
read,
books we've
anything.
I can tell you the
If I
fucking
asked you
saddest moment.
happiest, saddest, most surprising, or sexiest, what comes to mind?
Okay, saddest moment, and I
Yes.
think I can probably speak for all three of us, the eclipse.
Yeah.
Shit, I wasn't thinking that, but I am now. But go.
Well,
that's great.
if there was a sadder moment, then I blocked it from my memory.
Yeah. What was your sad moment?
I
Just
mean,
what jumped
mine
out to
is
you?
recently when Soldrin
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's awful.
kills herself.
The eclipse in Berserk is still worse for me, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty sad.
It is very sad. I'm not having one jump to mind.
Close your eyes.
When you say happiest, do you mean like a happy moment of a book, or just a moment that made us happy?
Either, however you
However you
translate
interpret
that. Yeah.
Corbin's duel against
it's awesome.
the
Shadowkeen.
the head of the shadow Kadashim, however you pronounce it. I'm forgetting the character's name, but the lead
It's like
lead
Gabriel,
demon.
fake Gabriel.
Well, no, it was the leader of the
Calidus? No, I know.
no,
Oh,
the
sorry,
one in
sorry,
the
sorry.
one in the all the battle in the fourth book is spectacular, but
That duel's with
the
it,
duel at the end of Ruin, the book 3 in Faithful and the Fallen, that one is pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
And the running mount at the end
Yeah.
is that's one of those like jumping off the couch, pumping your fist.
That
in
I
the
will
air.
say too, that scene. I think that scene is probably the thing I liked best in those books, and also, I often don't like action sequences in books. Just like I'm more often than not will not enjoy an action sequence for whatever reason. They just don't translate. Once we start like swinging swords and stuff, with exceptions, especially when they're elongated. But that one like totally works. It's totally easy to picture exactly what's happening. It translates, and then it's visceral, and it's phenomenal. So like, and I like it. For me, like my bar is like really, really, really high for that sort of thing. Where like I much prefer like if I'm getting an action sequence, I want like Eowyn and the Witch King. Like there's a verbal sparring. There's like a few things, but like once we're like he stabbed, he ducked, and then but like once we're doing that, I'm like I've honestly got to like stop, but like my brain just turns off. Like,
Dude,
I'm just,
yeah,
like,
that-
I'm so out.
Nothing
I'm like,
gets
I'm
better
not-
than the
I'm not-
I am no man.
Yeah,
Oh.
that I Am No Man's great. Sparse. It's like there's not a lot of hacking and slashing, and then we're just going.
I love violence as long as it's written well.
I should say,
But-
it's not the violence. It's just like that. It's like action, because it's the same thing. If it's like he grabbed a rope and he swung, it's just like if it's like just
As-
scaling a wall.
So
As
I see
opposed
it,
to-
sure.
It's just like
To when Lancelot fights a dragon, he fought a dragon, killed it. It was really hard.
Yeah.
Moving right along.
Moving on.
my
It was
happiest,
jousting.
my happiest moment. Or what were the four?
Happy, sad, surprising, and sexy.
Sexy. Okay, my happiest moment was reading the Grail Quest.
Yeah.
And it's like
Like
a
Galahad
it's
moment?
a blissful happy tinged with something like the other world, but like that.
Is it more like the mission that's happy or Galahad?
Just it was like a transcendent. So maybe happy's the wrong word, but it was like I felt like I was encountering something special and was like
Happy
like,
works.
Yeah,
Maybe
so,
glad.
Yeah,
Same.
Well, it was like it felt divine in a way, which I guess it was just like what the
Like you.
Sure.
yeah, but and it
Yeah.
I found it very moving.
I have to
So
change.
maybe it also was maybe that also works for both my happy and sad moment, to be honest. Beyond the eclipse,
because divine is
it's not sad in the eclipse, because obviously Galahad is no longer with us at the end, and there's something it's like tinged with both things.
Yeah, it got so happy that he died. So that's good.
Yeah.
I have to change my sad because I said the soldier thing, which is sad, but that isn't the saddest moment. The saddest moment out of everything we've read for me is when Skaflock's sister realizes that Skaflock is her brother.
That was
That
pretty
is the
heartbreaking.
saddest moment for me, because then she has to like
In
totally
Broken Sword.
well, in Broken Sword, because her like religion and everything is against it, and that is the saddest thing, because they were so happy and it was all just torn away from her in a moment, and that really sucks. And there is no coming back from it.
Yeah, for sure.
That was the saddest for me.
I actually want to amend my happiest. That fight is phenomenal. It made me very happy to read it. I think though that perhaps my happiest moment and like truly like an actual emotion-filled reading experience every time I've returned to it also is when at the end of Wizard Night when Abel is healing everybody. You knew I was going to say that.
Yeah, that self-sacrifice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your shit, bro.
Yeah. And healing all of his friends and taking care of everybody.
Yeah.
That's happy. Eclipse is sad. Surprising.
Yeah. My happiest moment is when the Elric brothers get their like bodies back kind of at the end of it all.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Even though they lose, it's like serendipitous and bittersweet in Full Metal
Fullmetal.
Alchemist.
Yeah.
When they accomplish what they set out to,
Yep.
they kind of get their dad back in a low-key weird sort of way. And they finish the shit and they're like, 16, 17. They can live the rest of their life, trauma in like bound or whatever, but still intact with what they had set out to do.
That series stuck the landing.
Yeah, that was
really did.
a super happy moment, I think, in the whole thing, and it was very on edge like the whole time. So happiest for me.
So
Full
okay,
Metal.
surprising.
Yep.
I have a surprising moment,
I have a surprise.
and I don't
It's
think
not a-
I can.
it's not a
I don't.
good
I don't
way.
think I can
No,
say
good-
it until
good or
the
bad
next
is great.
until the next episode when we talk about the next book of Berserk. It's another Berserk moment.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I think that was the reveal
you could say
That's a
was
good
maybe
idea.
the
That one
most
hadn't come to me.
surprising.
Just peppers in.
I think
But I'll try to think. I'll try to think of another thing that's not so horribly
my
spoilerific.
second
this is surprising but bad. And I'm trying to think of because we're thinking of story beats that are surprising.
Yeah.
I think the thing-
something that's not
I think-
a trope that was surprising.
I-
or maybe it is a trope,
I
but a
think
surprising
the thing that, and there's a lot that's surprising in Book of the New Sun. So there's
Absolutely,
a
yeah.
lot there that I
the
think
kind of
is
the point
powerful.
of that story is to be surprising.
But the one that comes to mind is at the end of and I'm spacing on the name of it, but the first of the trilogy in the last Elric book, The White Wolf, which is the collection, and the first one's called
No,
the whitest wolf? I don't know.
wasn't it just the White Wolf? Wasn't that the first book?
which is Von Beck. Maybe it was, but they've got the Von Beck guy in it.
Were you
but
surprised
they're-
by how
but they're-
shitty it was?
Yeah, but it's got Elric in our dimension, and there's Nazis and stuff. But when the most surprising moment is at the end of that book, they show up on dragons, and it's Moorcock's explanation for the Foo Fighters at the end of World War II. It's just like I just remember reading it, and it's just like, oh wow, we're doing this. Like this
I
is
can't
what's
even.
happening.
I don't
Like,
even remember.
okay.
To be perfectly honest with you, I've blocked all of that
It's
out.
like, oh,
So bad.
I was so
Moorcock's just
disappointed.
explaining the Foo Fighters. Turns out it was Elric of Menibide on the back of a dragon. Okay, fine.
There goes my hero.
yeah,
That
basically.
very much surprised me. He's like, oh, okay, wow, all right, fair enough.
Well, okay. Here's another manga surprise, and we'll be talking about this probably in the next episode as well, or one coming up at least. I was surprised by Aaron Yeager's villain turn
Yeah.
at the end of Attack on Titan.
Well, villain, non-villain turn.
Savior, hero of the world.
Sure, yeah.
You ever watch The Avengers?
Depending on how.
There's too many mouths to feed. There's a fine line.
From a certain point
of view.
From
Oh my
a certain
God.
point of view. No, it's we're gonna have to have a whole discussion about it
Yeah.
because, that was a surprise to me. That was probably the biggest surprise because I somehow had kept myself fairly spoiler free about how the ending was gonna
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
So his villain turn was a surprise, and the fact that it never really, I don't think, actually turned back, which is kind of what I expected.
They give an explanation.
They do. They give an explanation.
Also, this doesn't count for me because I'd already watched the anime somewhat but it doesn't eclipse our reading.
It doesn't not
Another
count.
really surprising moment, which probably would have been there for me maybe had I not. Well, I've got another idea too.
Stop talking yourself out of it.
surprising
Just
moments.
go.
Well, I'm just thinking of more. The more I think of them, the more I come.
You can
the
give
more
two.
I think of. But also what is the King Ant being killed by a nuke in the dude's heart.
Yeah.
That was pretty surprising.
That was pretty sick.
It's pretty surprising.
But also,
in Hunter x Hunter.
Also, he didn't get killed by the explosion. He
The
got
radiation,
killed by
the poisoning.
radiation.
Yeah,
poisoning.
days
When it's
days
the
later.
Rose, it's the
Yeah.
rose. Instead of a mushroom cloud, it's a rose cloud. But
But
that,
still, like he
that
literally comes back
again,
to life.
and that,
basically.
I was just when that happened again. I was just like, what did I?
What did I just read?
What did I just read? What did I just watch?
What just happened?
What? Okay, like, and it also explains why he's so cavalier in this fight, because it's like he's got really no chance of winning, and he knows he's got a trump card. He knows like, okay, well,
I'll just nuke.
I'm gonna nuke you.
You have a nuke inside me. I have a nuke in my ass.
I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you cut all my limbs off.
That was it. And then the other one was Berserk taking a classic fantasy turn.
Yeah,
It was
randomly.
also one of my surprises.
I
And one of my-
suspect Kentaro Miura had to have read Leoness.
Yeah, there's a lot in. I feel like he must have, to be honest.
Because
Also,
Leoness
I
came out.
was Gonzo Black for a while too.
Yep.
Which again, I don't think he's like the main inspiration for that. But
No, but I specifically with the fairies and the elves and the trolls and ogres and everything.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god.
He had to have.
I think so. I've never seen a depiction of them.
Yeah, being as
that.
as rapey as they are.
Yeah, well, and even just the physical
the
description
Berserk
of them all.
rapiness
Like,
matches them perfectly.
yeah.
Yes. All the warty, the whole, like everything about them. Yeah.
They're so disgusting.
So that's
And the fact that he like shrinks himself to be smaller so he can rape a woman,
it's
what?
It's gnarly.
I mean,
It's
the first time
bad.
I read that, I was just like, I like felt
like
physically.
he
ill.
makes himself big so he can like domineer, but then he's got to get smaller so he can like have fun like raping people. Like what?
Yeah.
Like that's so messed up.
Yep.
That wasn't
Ogres-
the most
ogres are
surprising for
terrible.
me, though.
Ogres are bad.
Who knew? What a transition to Sam's final question of the sexiest moment.
I haven't shared my most surprising.
Okay,
go
please
first,
do.
go.
Please
But
change.
Shrek-
please do.
But Shrek is not rapey. He's a great ogre.
Shrek's okay, as far as we know. Who knows what allegations are
But
going to...
that,
Maybe
yes.
maybe Shrek
But like
5
in modern
will be
times, we're getting like ogre washing. It's like we're getting like content to make us feel safe around ogres now.
Yeah, that's right. For the ogres. I feel like my most surprising moment is actually in this is very weird, but it's in the Stephen King book we read. We didn't write it.
Nice.
Stephen King.
Eyes of the Dragon.
Yeah, his descent with the towels and like the way they peppered that in with the sewing needle and stuff. I was very surprised by how he had like kind of penciled in the framework for that, but then like pressed go right at that moment where he like used basically napkin threads to like build a really thin ass rope to like scale like Rapunzel himself down. That was very surprising to me in the way that he wrote it.
Sure.
And just kind of demonstrated to me, oh, that's why Stephen King is a master
Yeah,
writer.
he's
Had he
turns
read
out.
Shawshank by then?
I think so.
Because it's interesting to
It
have
did have a Andy Dufresne climb
No.
through 2 miles of shit and
I'd have
came out
to-
clean
But it's
on the other
same with, like,
side.
the doing thing for a long time.
Like the tiny, but it was
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
surprising to me. 'Cause
I'd
I
have
was
to
like,
I'd have to look it up,
I
but I
was
think
like,
he did.
oh, he got me. I didn't know that that's what the doll.
I hadn't thought about the
because
Shawshank
all the time he was like this dollhouse, but this dollhouse. Like the whole thing
Right.
was like, all right, what is it about the freaking dollhouse that's so awesome? And he delivers, and it's surprising. And the reason I asked a surprising question is because most everything that we're surprised by is still kind of a trope,
Sure.
honestly. And that's what makes a trope is like it surprised somebody once and they're like, oh, let's do that. So that, you do it again and again. But like this one was, it seemed like in the top 5 of that trope.
Nice.
But on that note, though, I need to do more questionable internet research on this because I've
Questionable
do.
internet research. What is questionable internet research?
All of it.
Like don't check my Google
All
history.
of it is questionable.
It's questionable. Oh, what do you mean by horny
Yeah.
squirrels? I don't worry.
No. It's you mentioned the Dollhouse in Eyes of the Dragon, which came out in 1984. When it was first released and re-released.
Good year.
But we just finally read Linus Altogether, which I think I mentioned to you guys, but which came out in 1983. And there's like, it's not a big part of the book, but there's like the line where it's like, and the son of King Audrey, I think, is like he's a dullard who all he does is play with doll houses. And there's a line, and
I missed that.
I really think. I feel like King must read Vance, but like
certainly.
I feel like he read that and was like, ugh, and he got so mad that he was like, "That boy can't play with doll. You can play with dollhouses.
Let me show you what a dollhouse boy can
Actually,
do."
I'm going to show you a book where like playing with dollhouses saved this guy's life.
I
It's
love
like,
it.
I don't know if it's real, but I was just like, it's so specific that
It seemed
I
like
feel
he
it
got
has to
really,
be.
really mad about
Maybe
it.
so.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Either
It's
way,
a
I
great.
love it.
It's a great
Authors
theory.
responding to each other.
I
a
love
great
that my
theory.
surprise, because I remember you saying that maybe last
a while.
year.
Yeah, we talked about it. But
Anyways,
okay, I'll do my sexiest moment.
you have that.
Which
ready.
there's a number of things, but honestly, the one, and it's like kind of weird and funny and gross all at the same time. But it's definitely the scene in Swords of Lankmar where like the mouse girl
the
is
sexy
like,
mouse
Hell
lady.
yeah.
sexy mouse ladies with Mouser, but then she's like
She like shoots
she's
a pin into him to
well,
make him want
But
her.
then like she's like making his like mouse her like her servant kiss Mouser, and it's just like
I
it's
forgot
like,
about
so-
that.
yeah,
It's so
such a
funny.
weird scene.
She's
But
literally
it's like, yeah,
having
it's-
her
it's-
servant have sex with him while she's making out with him.
Yes.
But she's like riding on her shoulders.
Yeah, it's all weird and strange.
This might
but
be
it,
my
yeah,
funniest
yeah.
moment, actually.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it would work.
But
It
it's
kind of works
also
both.
sexy. And she's like, don't look at her. Keep your eyes on me.
And I just thought that was hilarious.
And
But
then
yeah,
he's like, I mean, I had to look at both of them for sure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, it might be my funniest, happiest, and sexiest.
yeah,
And
moment.
sexiest, yeah, it's perfect.
You can fit them all.
I think
Except
my
saddest.
sexiest is probably The Last Wish, the story in the book of the same name, but when Geralt and Yennefer first meet, and they become intertwined by fate.
Yeah, very sexy.
Super sexy.
Yeah,
There's
that's
some-
probably my pick.
Yeah, there's some good. There wasn't a ton of this stuff in things we read, but there was a decent amount. But there's a lot of supple and live ladies in Conan.
Absolutely, lots of supple and live. Of course,
just-
Conan
just-
himself is very supple and live as well.
Sexy is baked into every.
Siri is
Conan,
described very, in a very lovely manner.
Absolutely.
Jolenta, we would be
Yeah.
remiss to not mention Jolenta in Book of the New Sun,
Yeah,
as well
that's-
as
fake, however
and
she
then-
may be.
And then there's a few romantic moments between Casca and Guts and Berserk. So
Definitely. Well, and
Yeah.
so we can't forget Severian's hand job in the garden at the party.
which is also funny. That scene is very funny too.
And that he basically has sex with his grandma for the whole last half of.
oh my god.
Your sexy moment, Sam.
My
and then we're gonna
sexiest
close this
moment
out.
is from a Book of the New Sun.
Okay.
And it would be at the very, very beginning, all of Severian and Thekla's talking in the prison cells.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
I thought that was very sexy and very also like, are they doing anything or not?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It turns out they are.
We basically kind of think they are, but it never explicitly says.
Well, we do get it late. We get a flashback
Yeah.
later that makes it
yeah,
explicit.
I thought that was pretty sexy.
Yeah.
All right. That was awesome. Good rapid fire, Sam. To close this out here, what are 3 books that we're reading this year that we'll exclude Leoness because we're already reading that and we already have established that we love it. Same with First Law. We're reading those right now. We love them.
Yeah.
Post Leoness and post First Law, what are 3 books that you guys are excited about us reading this year? And I can go through the list if we need to go through the
Yeah, I
list.
forget.
Okay.
I remember one.
So next month we are reading Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. May, we will be reading The Devils, the brand new book by Joe Abercrombie. In June, and in anticipation of the series releasing, we'll be reading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. In July, we will be reading Peace by Gene Wolfe. August, we'll be reading Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. September, we will be doing our deep dive, which will almost certainly be several episodes long, of Latro in the Mist, both The Soldier of the Mist and Soldier of Arete by Gene Wolfe. October, for our spooky season, we'll be reading House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. November, tentatively, we'll be reading Lies Weeping, the brand new Black Company book by Glenn Cook. And we will also be starting and ending in December reading the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin.
For me, I think so I've already read Latro, but I'm very excited to dive into that with you guys.
Yeah.
So I think beyond that, it's probably Peace by Gene Wolfe, which I love Gene Wolfe, and I've not read Peace yet. I'm very excited to. I'm very excited to read Sirens, which is a book I know Sam loves, and we were originally planned to read, and then pivoted, and then after that, probably. So I mentioned 3, but I'm very excited to read Blood Meridian. I'm also very excited I'm pretty excited about Night of the Seven Kingdoms as well.
Yeah. I would say Blood Meridian is my first one.
Yep.
Because of how acclaimed it is and reading with you guys. The second one would be the new Glen Cook books. Mm-hmm. I'm just really interested to see how that dude's novels are panning out now. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's like 84.
Yep.
And like, what book is this now for him? Like freaking 18?
Well, it's the 11th Black Company book, but he's also written many other series of books.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he puts out now. And then Sirens, because I've loved that since I was like 17 years old. So I'm very excited to read that with somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's me.
Man, I'm excited about everything that we're reading. But if I had to pick just 3, Devils. I adore Joe Abercrombie, and I love him more every time I read more stuff.
My answer might change after reading First Law, but I just haven't finished it
yet. That's fine. Blood Meridian, and definitely very excited to read that, and like you said, excited to read it with you guys. Talk about grimdark, and then I'm actively reading Latro right now, in the interest of being
You're not
able
gonna say
read
Lies
it.
Weeping?
Well, I'm trying to decide whether I can exclude it or not, because I'm currently reading Latro right now, just the same way as I am with Leoness and First Law. Yeah. So like I'm putting that to a side, but I just want to mention I'm fucking stoked to talk about Latro.
Latro's amazing.
I'm reading that and a boatload of other ancient Greek shit to prep for it. But yes, obviously Lies Weeping. Glen Cook is one of my favorite authors of all time. Black Company is my number 2 book series of all time. And so so stoked for another one.
Books. It's amazing.
Yeah, the dude's a stud. So
but it's
what a fucking gift.
To be 84 and putting out novels. It's cool.
What a gift to all of us that we get more. Mm-hmm. Whether it's good as in lives up to the old books or not. Like just what a fucking gift. Yeah. It's so cool. To have one of your favorite authors still putting stuff out there. So this has been another episode of the Under Towers podcast. My name is Steven.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Sam.
And if you enjoyed tonight's episode, if you liked this format where we just kind of talk, this is what our book club is like. We just talk about the stuff that we're reading and what we're excited about. So if you like this and you want to see more episodes like this, please let us know down in the comments. If you
don't, say something else that you might like.
Yeah, exactly. We're always open.
It's not this
McDonald's food reviews, please.
As long as you like #UnderTowers, it's good.
Absolutely. Give us a like and a comment, subscribe, all free for you, and helps us out substantially with the algorithm. Share us with your friends, and you can find us on all the social media bullshit. And we love you. We will see you at the next episode. CIMMERIAN.